All right, so I'd like to call the February meeting of the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council to order. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I believe the flag will be up on the screen momentarily. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks everybody. And now Vice Chair Handren, would you take roll for us, please?
Yes, I will. Councilmember Cooper. No. Councilmember Dickey.
Here.
Councilmember Doss.
Here.
Councilmember Eagles.
Here.
Councilmember Nardo Morgan. Here. Councilmember Newhouser.
Here.
And Councilmember Oldroyd. Here.
And I'm here too, Chair Dawson, and which I know you know, but just stick with the protocol.
Sure.
So we're going to turn off question and answer in chat for this meeting. So when public comment is opened, for those members of the public, please raise your hand and you'll be promoted to speak. And if at any time it appears that our meeting has been hacked, we'll immediately terminate and reschedule for a future date. And I see council members Newhouser and Cooper just showed up. So welcome to the February meeting. And I just want to, one little thing in the beginning, just to say that we have a very long agenda. It's hard to say how long it's going to take. Some items might be very quick, but we have, I think, the most number of items we've had so far. So just to keep in mind, let's try to keep our comments as brief as possible while still, saying what we need to say. Okay, let's move to, are there any amendments or corrections to the January regular and special meeting minutes?
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Newhouser.
I was present at the last meeting.
Okay, thanks. So we'll add your name to the last meeting. Any other corrections? Okay, do I have a motion to, Hannah, do we need to approve them separately or can we just do it as a joint thing?
You can do them both together.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve both the minutes from January 5th and the minutes from January 19th?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Seconded.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from January, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so we've approved the minutes from January. And so we're going to move on to the first round of public comments, which is limited to items that aren't on the agenda. From what I know, we haven't received any written public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? Please raise your hand and you'll have 2 minutes once you're promoted to speak to say your piece. So anyone from the public who would like to speak, please raise your hand.
And Chair Dawson, we have a number of hands, so I'll go ahead and share the timer.
Okay. And just a quick reminder that this is for items not on the agenda. So if it's anything related to the NOP for SDC, that will come later.
And can I confirm we're seeing the timer slide?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, our first commenter is Vicky.
Welcome,
You
Vicky.
should now be able to unmute.
Hi there. I know I'm speaking later about SDC, but I just want to give a quick announcement. I am a member of the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency Advisory Commission, and there's a couple important workshops coming up. The Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan was approved in December by its board and submitted to the State Department of Water Resources for approval as required by state law. This has been a multi-year process, and you can get more information by going to sonomavalleygroundwater.org to see the plan and find out about the workshops that I'm going to mention now. The next step is implementation of the plan, including developing a fee study for groundwater users such as well owners. 2 important workshops will be held to explain the need for funding and the fee options and to receive community feedback. The first meeting is Tuesday, March 29th, and it's a virtual meeting from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. The second meeting will be held on Wednesday, April 13th, hopefully in person, location to be announced, also at 5:30 p.m. So again, go to sonomavalleygroundwater.org /meetings to register for the workshops and to get more information. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vicki.
And the next commenter is Alice. Alice, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Alice.
Hey, hi everyone. So I just wanted to quickly mention, and I'm not upset with the Kenwood Press for publishing the letter because that's what they do, but I have really taken issue with a letter to the editor that was published in this latest edition from the 15th, where Stephen Sorkin, who is a local developer living in Diamond A, he writes, he says, I can't help but interpret the demands by North Sonoma Valley MAC, referencing the letter, to keep the site intensity at 450 dwelling units and attempt to maintain an exclusionary buffer between the white enclave of central Glen Ellen and the denser and browner areas along Madrone Road and the Springs. And, you know, there are legitimate reasons for people wanting to put a lot of housing there. There are legitimate reasons for people not wanting a lot of housing there. But to just blankly throw out that anybody who supports the North Sonoma Valley MAC letter, which would be, you know, the Springs MAC, the Sonoma City Council, hey, Kate, you live down in that neighborhood, you're a racist. I just find that so incredibly offensive. And that's something that we really, if that is a prevalent thought that's out there, that's something that we need to address, because it's so not okay. Anyway, I'm sure all of you have read that, and I'm guessing other people might have something to say about that too, but I wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice.
And the next commenter is Sharon. Sharon, you should
Welcome.
now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Sharon.
Hi. Well, it's interesting, Alice, you made that comment because, you know, the comment I was going to make, I had read that letter. I thought, wow, he's really off base. And most of the people of the Glen Ellen Forum and the MAC have been supporting the fact that this neighborhood is Glen Ellen. It's the county who's trying to sever us and call us Eldridge, which we're not. And I just take offense at the whole thing. You know, I really have a problem with Susan Gorin not taking any ownership on it, that it's not, you know, supervisors don't decide what is a community. Well, nobody's in charge. And yet we've got them in their documents continuing to refer to us as Eldridge, and the housing they want to put just north of Martin is North Eldridge. I mean, it's discouraging, and I feel very unrepresented. And I'm not even brown. I can imagine what the brown people must feel. It's really sad. And I think Sorkin is off base, and he's trying to create an issue because he wants to develop, build, baby, build. That's it.
Thank you, Sharon.
And giving it just one more moment. And I see no further hands, Chair Dawson.
Okay, if any council members would like to comment on, respond to the public comment, this is an opportunity. Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Just that I do appreciate that it's being brought to us that there's some sort of false divides there's some sort of false divides occurring here. And I do think we need to be well aware of this in terms of, if we, as Alice pointed out, that folks who don't want a lot of housing, it means that there's somehow, all kinds of things, right? And I think those assumptions are really unfortunate. And we do need to be aware that those are happening, either anti-housing or even racist. And I think they're not fair, but they're out there. And I think we need to be aware of them and maybe consider, messaging around that and action around that moving forward, to be determined.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. And I'll just mention that we do have in the plan to have the Office of Equity speak to the MAC in the next, I'm not sure if it's happening next month, but in the next at least couple months, we'll be having conversations. I mean, I know I'm aware that I live in a very white community, but I like being out in the country, and I would certainly welcome a much more diverse population, both ethnically and age-wise. So, I'd love to find ways to work on that. And anyway, any other comments? Okay, so now we're going to move on to what I think is going to be the funnest part of the evening, which is recognizing Nikita Dukaraz. And Hannah, I'm assuming that she's on, so would you promote her so we can see her? And I saw her name, but let's see. Hey, Nikita. Hey, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for showing up. And I'm just so happy to be able to do this. We don't have a city council in Glen Ellen or Kenwood, but this is the closest thing we have. And I don't know you personally very well. I know your mom a little better. I see your dad walking up in the park. So I just feel like you're part of the Glen Ellen family. And the fact that you made it to the Olympics and earned a bronze medal, and also just knowing the challenges you've had with anxiety that I think everybody faces at certain times in their lives, and you've been really open about that, and that's just been it's been really heartwarming and appreciated, and we're just really proud that you're from Glen Ellen. No matter where you end up, you always have a place here in Glen Ellen. So that's what I wanted to say. Just and it was exciting I got to watch your performance from your neighbor's driveway when they had the they had the whole gathering. So that was pretty cool. I don't know if it's the same driveway you did your first flip on, but it must have been pretty close.
Definitely started out there. But yeah, thanks for having me. And I feel very lucky to have grown up in Glen Ellen and such a tight community. It was just, I've since moved away and stuff, but I say this a lot, like I wouldn't have preferred to grow up anywhere else, just having, growing up on Riddle Road and just being able to ride my bike freely. That's kind of where it all started, and having so many awesome neighbors that kind of just encouraged it. And yeah, definitely an awesome place to grow up.
Well, great to hear. Yeah, we're glad we could be that place for you. And any other council members want to make have any comments for Nikita? And Nikita, I should say I will be sending you your certificates coming in the mail. So I'll send you something that it'll look fancier than this, but will look something like that.
Oh, sweet. With
a signature, and I think there might even be some gold trim on it. I'm not sure. Yeah, suitable for framing.
I feel like I want to clap or snap, or what can we do to
really,
recognize Nikita?
Thank you.
And Angela.
Hi, Nikita. I know your mom really well, and your brothers and my son commuted to Waldorf School together. And I just remember you as just a little girl riding her bike around like crazy. And I want to say that you are so brave, so talented, and so amazing. And that it is just so special to see you grown up and just at the Olympics. It was phenomenal. We sat and watched you, all of us together, and we're just so proud that you're from Glen Ellen and what you've accomplished. And I think you should be so proud also. We love you.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Anyone else? Yeah, Supervisor Gorin?
Nikita, it's great to see you again, and really need to thank Leslie Vaughn for organizing the incredible reception that the city and the county gave to you a few weeks ago, and the incredible parade from Glen Ellen back to Glen Ellen. I followed the truck with the great big flag. It was sort of fun. Nikita has heard this story before, but when I was newly elected as a supervisor, her mom, Rob Wilson, and a number of other folks came to me as one of my first constituent meetings and said, we have incredible youth in our valley who need a place to practice their BMX bikes, and we want to create a pump track on the field at Maxwell Farms. We know exactly where it's going to be, right next to the skate park with picnic tables, and we're ready with shovels and moving the dirt over there to build this track. And I said, I would love that. And it's not my park. I can't give you permission to do that. So thus became a very long journey of trying to find, in the county bureaucratic nightmare, of trying to find funding to update the master plan. And we did. Many of you showed up for the master plan updates for both Maxwell Farms and Larson Park. So we have completed master plans, and we don't have the funding for a pump track. So congratulations to you, Nikita. I hope that we are going to start a crowd raising effort to build that pump track in honor of you. And indeed, all of us, even beyond Glen Ellen, are so proud of you, and so bold and so brave. And there was some stories circulating how you as a child were a little incorrigible, and you were directed into finding a sport and found incredible mentors that led you on this amazing path. I've been watching snippets of the Winter Olympics this week and watching the skiers go flips and twists, and thinking to myself about you and understanding that snow might be a little softer to land on and fall on than concrete. So hats off to you. You're amazing. And we hope that we can, your mom and I are playing telephone tag to figure out how we can get together to organize the community and to find the funding for this track. And you are the inspiration for it. So thank you for inspiring us in Sonoma Valley and so many other people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other council member comments? Any comments from the public?
And I'm not seeing any raised hands amongst our attendees.
All right. Well, Nikita, thanks for joining us. And yeah, we're just really proud of what you've done. And we'll look forward to seeing you when you're back in town one of these days.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for being an awesome community. Bye.
Good night. Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.
Stay in touch.
All right. Nice to have some inspiration in a meeting.
Absolutely.
So now I guess it's now time for Supervisor Gorin's update. Oh.
Unmute. I always forget that. Even the best of us do that. I really want to thank you all for your incredible passion around the Sonoma Developmental Center, and I know you'll be talking about that a little later. And I sat on the Planning Advisory Team presentation today, and I still have some disagreements on how the Permit Sonoma characterized our board discussion, but that's for a later time. We did not have a meeting this week, yesterday, and we won't have one until March 1st. Where we will discuss and bring forward a financial plan for a new county center. Will it be acquisition of the Sears site, which is what I was advocating for? It makes a lot of sense than it did out in town. Or building something on the county campus. People think, oh, well, you're fine there. Well, let me tell you, those buildings are held together by sealing wax and duct tape. And we can't even get a cell signal inside the supervisor's office. You have to sort of hang out close to the window or be on the back patio. And we're spending more on deferred maintenance and keeping those buildings alive than they're worth, certainly. Susan Oldroyd can appreciate that because she spent a career designing courthouses and civic centers and understand the challenges and the fiscal challenges of financing something as large as that. Well, behind the scenes, we are working on a teleworking policy and really being very discerning about what employees might move to a new facility, either downtown or the county center. And because I keep reminding the CAO that our team of 4 have not really met in person at the office in 2 years. And I think that genie is out of the bottle. I think the county employees will continue to operate that way, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a need to have a county facility. Part of the discussion also is how we finance it. So there will be some financing details coming forward. And kudos to Linda Hopkins for holding firm and saying, you know, it's great, I'd like to support this, but we need a service center in the Russian River area. And I'm right there with her, and we're starting to investigate vacant storefronts that might hold a mini service center from the county for health and human services. Eventually, I have said pretty loudly that I would like to have the county service center, command center, incident command center, and a hub for other county functions to be located at the Sonoma Developmental Center. So when Brian O talks about flexibility of the site and rehabbing some of the buildings, we are thinking about that. We think there is a place for us as well as nonprofits like the Sonoma Sonoma Ecology Center and other nonprofits. So even though it's short of details on what kind of employers and institutional presence might be on the site, trust me, we're in the background feeding Brian with all kinds of information and ideas on how we could have a stronger sense of community and neighborhood on that site. And I really want to thank, I missed some of the commentary before. It's unfortunate that we've gotten to this point of having divisiveness over lack of diversity or diversity and the advocacy that you and the MAC are putting forward in advocating for something within the scale of Glen Ellen. I think it's totally appropriate that you're doing that. Hats off to you. I will continue to carry that message and advocate for you. Maybe a little higher density than what you're proposing, but not 1,000 units. I've been very clear about that. Also, in response to Sharon, thank you for your letter, because you made it very clear to me a year ago that you in around the Marty Drive area want to be known as Glen Ellen, and that Eldridge or Sonoma Developmental Center, as you refer to it, is the hole in the donut. And I absolutely agree with that. And there's no doubt in my mind that when the specific plan comes forward, we'll reverse some of the nomenclature, incorporate it in the plan, and I will have a conversation with Permit Sonoma again. I disagree with many of the things that they're talking about, but that's part of the scoping session. So I hope you are all planning on attending the scoping session tomorrow evening, 5:30, and sending in written comments, and that could be one of the comments. You want Glen Ellen to be known as Glen Ellen and not Eldridge and the South and North Eldridge. Totally appropriate. And that's why I responded to Sharon the way I did. This is for community to advocate for. I'm going to be right there with you. But I hope you will start being loud and outspoken about, as you have been, about the name of Glen Ellen. And we started Glen Ellen Forum around the divisiveness of the Glen Ellen Triangle and the original person who was not happy with what was going on there for legitimate reasons. I said to her, please, Glen Ellen, organize yourself, come up with the name, come up with a design for the signs. I can find funding to pay for that for the signs at the Triangle, south by Marty Drive, Warm Springs Road, wherever you want, but let's come up with a design and a name and make it loud and clear to everyone passing through the beautiful village of Glen Ellen that you are a whole. So I'm right there with you.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions or comments from council members? I have one, Susan, related to what you're just talking about, and that is, what would it take to get a sign at the corner of Madrone, maybe on the south corner, so we can include Kate's Eagles neighborhood that says now entering Glen Ellen?
I think it would be totally fine. I'll work with Johanna Silverts, who is now the director for not only transportation and public works, but general services. And I said, really? You want both of those functions? What are you drinking? What are you slurping? What are you smoking? But so let's work on that. It is as you know, I'm still working on widening Arnold for the bike lanes a little further south than that. It's an exercise in patience and frustration. And so I think it could be very easily accomplished. But I guess you could have a boring sign, green sign, entering the village of Glen Ellen. But would you like to have something that has an emblem symptomatic of Glen Ellen to really put you on the map? So I think that's an appropriate conversation for the MAC to have. And you have some design professionals here among you. So get busy, come to work, get to work, and we'll see what kind of funding we can create, as we did for the fire signs in front of the fire stations that Damon and the other folks were so instrumental in pushing forward.
Great. I think that would certainly address this issue in a very concrete way. Any other comments or questions from council members? Yeah, Council Member Cooper.
You know, I feel like kind of an outsider living in Kenwood, but I've been here since 1980. And when I talk with people about the council and committee I'm on, everybody wants to know exactly where's Eldridge. Everybody seems to know Glen Ellen loud and clear, and but they don't really know exactly where Eldridge is. So what I'm hearing is that the Glen Ellen people don't feel like they're acknowledged or known. Eldridge is it's a question, not being in need of community. I'm just
Arthur, I'm sure, is a better source of response, but it is stems back from the community of Eldridge, which was the Sonoma Developmental Center. And so it's sort of a holdover from that. Eldridge is really referring to, I believe, the developmental center. And I'm going to go to the real expert, Arthur.
Thanks, Susan. Well,
okay, just
yes,
curious.
I mean, I got a whole article I could send you about Captain Eldridge, but I think the problem here is that the Census Bureau designated that whole neighborhood south of what we're calling Eldridge as Eldridge. So it's Eldridge, a census designated place, and that's what Permit Sonoma is using because it's sort of a quasi-official thing, but it really has nothing to do with how people living there think of themselves. And my wife grew up in that area in the 70s, and nobody called it Eldridge. It was always called Glen Ellen.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem, is that there is this overlapping bureaucratic designation that Permit Sonoma has grabbed onto and is refusing to let go.
Well, you raise an interesting point, Arthur. What would it take to rename that census tract? And that's above my pay grade, but at least I can ask the question.
Well, I'll write to my friend Joe Biden, see what he can do.
Please do that.
That's an idea. I hadn't thought of that. I'm not sure how I'm not sure what the process is. It's probably like above my pay grade to figure out how to designate places in that way. But yeah, maybe that's a possibility. Any other comments? And then we'll go to public comments. Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser. Councilmember Newhouser.
Sorry. I'm like, hello. I couldn't hear you acknowledging me. Anyway, I just wanted to address the sign issue briefly because as part of the design that was submitted to the county for the what we call the firehouse triangle, which is that little piece of earth that's located directly across from the firehouse, actually has a welcome to Glen Ellen sign in that design. And so that's where we could get creative and have something really wonderful. But then in part of those discussions, it was suggested that a sign even go further up Arnold, closer to Highway 12, closer to what we call the Dunbar Triangle, which is that little Sonoma Land Trust triangle there that is also being caretaken for by the Glen Ellen Forum. So, but the wild card in all of this is the ballot box issue, which we're hoping to resolve. And if that gets resolved sooner than later, then we could move forward with a design. But I think what's inspiring about this is that this could lead to a sign at either end, which is what you were suggesting, Susan. And I think that would be wonderful. And they could both be designed, or they could be similar. And then that, I think, would create a real sense of place. Thank you.
Three locations, Mark, North, South, and Warm Springs Road. Not sure how far up Warm Springs, but that's another entryway into the beautiful village of Glen Ellen.
Yeah, exactly. Where is the dividing line? It's pretty fuzzy because then you have Trinity.
It's wherever you want it.
Well, yeah, and you know that'll raise some controversy. Anyway, thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, let's move on to public comments. If anyone has any questions or comments on at this point.
And I'm seeing a couple hands, so go ahead and share my screen. All right, and first up, we have Sharon. Sharon, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Sharon.
Thanks again. Susan, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm very encouraged by your comments, and I really appreciate it. I think the signage is a great idea. We are an inclusive community, and our ballots are mailed to us in Glen Ellen. My driver's license is Glen Ellen. My passport is Glen Ellen. The title on the house was Glen Ellen. Everything's Glen Ellen. So the census business and Google Maps has just been very, it's been upsetting because it's like you're being pushed out of your community. So your support is greatly appreciated. I think the signs are a fantastic idea. And I'd like to just thank all of the MAC board members because you guys really do one heck of a job and you're working hard on all of our behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
All right, our next, oops, got that started too quickly. Next commenter is Elisa. Elisa, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Elisa.
Howdy, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I'm getting ready to be vocal tomorrow, not to worry. But right now I want to say, yes, I think it's fantastic to have this signage, and I really am happy that we're going to do it as a group. And Mark Newhouser and I worked with the triangle a little bit and the Dunbar triangle, and definitely it's important to do a careful consideration and not end up with something like whatever the entry to what is Boys Springs or whatever that is, that thing that they built. We aren't doing something like that, I'm sure. So here we are, we'll work together to do something distinctive and welcoming, and it'll be fantastic. And I think we just need to set a timeline. If we could have this done in 2 years, that would be heavenly, you know? So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Elisa.
All right, and our next speaker is Tracy. Tracy, you should be able to unmute.
Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, everybody. So just a couple of points. I know that the U.S. Geological Survey has a board of domestic name places or domestic names. And I use that a lot in my research. And I know that you can appeal to that to get a place name changed. So that's something that we might want to look into in terms of formally getting the Eldridge name applied to the SDC property, if that's what we want to do, and changing the name of what some people call Eldridge to Glen Ellen. And the other part is, I've forgotten. So I'm just going to call it there. Thank you all for everything. Bye.
Thanks, Tracy. There's a lot on our minds these days. I have moments like that too.
All right, our next commenter is Teresa. Teresa, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Teresa.
I just wanted to say that the reason why Eldridge is because it had its very own zip code, and that was 95431 that encompassed the property of the developmental centers. Ergo, that was Eldridge. I can't speak to the outside of that, but that was just for information only for future planning. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, basically it's a mess, but on the other hand, I think within the community, there's a very clear sense of what Glen Ellen is. So it's just these outside bureaucracies that are messing with us. Okay, so anyone else?
Yes, our next commenter is Bean. Bean, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Bean.
Hi, thanks. So while we were talking about that, I was reading the census.gov site, and it sounds like the census area there has a digit code, a multi-digit code, and the names come from whatever the local people want to call it. And apparently no one ever responded to them before about this. So they chose something that was contiguous with Eldridge. And our next chance to change it might not be for another 10 years, but it's still worth a try. Thanks.
Thanks, Bean.
And giving it just one more moment. And seeing no further hands, Chair Dawson.
All right, thanks, everybody. Hey, the
And
perennial.
Arthur,
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank everybody commenting. Great sources of information, and we can help follow up on that a little bit. And one of the conundrums that has not been discussed within the SDC plan is the location of the post office. I don't even know if it's still operating, but they came to me about a year or two ago and said, we're going to close down the post office. And I fear that once they close down a post office, it will be gone forever. And so even though there was a post office with its very own zip code there, I don't know whether they're trying to consolidate post office. So I'm not sure that SDC will once again be able to have its own zip code and post office. One of those little bureaucratic things that someone should just take note of and maybe follow up on in a little bit. But great information. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan. All right, now let's move on to number 6, which is our letter of support for the Sonoma Valley Fire Department, which was requested by Fire Chief Steve Eir. And thank you very much, Councilmember Newhouser, for communicating with the fire chief and also drafting the letters. So much appreciated. So I think the plan is to have you share your screen, and I'll just say personally, I had one very small comment that I think I already sent into Hannah, but I thought they were well done.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on sharing my screen. I mean, if Hannah wants to show a copy of the letter, that's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The only comment I wanted to make about it was that that in our outreach for our grant proposals for funding for the MAC proposed planning process to do neighborhood outreach and do the kind of organizing and development of a CWPP, this community wildfire protection plan. We did a lot of outreach to get letters of support, and the Sonoma Valley Fire Department provided letters. And in fact, they provided commitments, resources And this is kind of the quid pro quo, so to speak. So I'm more than happy that and actually pleased that we are reciprocating and providing support for his project as he has for ours. And I think the letters are pretty straightforward. I used a template. Are you prepared to share that, Hannah?
Absolutely. Is there one of the two that you,
I
does
mean,
it matter?
actually,
which-
matter.
Before we do that, should we just see if, I mean, do people feel there's a need to review it on screen? And
not necessarily. You said something about sharing the screen.
It's just part of my notes here, but so raise your hand if you'd like to take a look at the letter on screen, and it's fine if you do. But we all did get a copy of it, so people may have reviewed it. Okay, so it appears that, yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Well, I'm wondering, would it be nice for the community? I assume, they had access to it.
Sure.
But that's the only reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I don't know if, do you want to read it out loud, Mark?
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so this one is for the county one. The other letter is for CAL FIRE. So these are two separate funding sources, and I do not have all of the information from the actual proposal, so I can't tell you the precise differences, but they're both funding basically the personnel to operate their chipper and to help the community. So that's the gist of it, but I'll read it. To whom it may concern, this letter is in support of the Sonoma Valley Fire District's application for grant funding through your organization. We believe this project will provide a valuable benefit to our community. The North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council is appointed by the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors and serves the communities of Glen Ellen, Kenwood, and Eldridge. The NSV MAC advises on issues of local concern, such as emergency preparedness for wildfire safety, and provides a process to effectively communicate the needs of the community to county government and elected leaders. The MAC also serves to deliver information about the county government, including information from fire districts to the residents within our jurisdiction. The NSV MAC Emergency Preparedness Ad Hoc Committee conducted outreach to the community and determined the need for greater wildfire preparedness and education outreach to encourage community-based evacuation planning, home hardening and defensible space, vegetation management around homes and along evacuation routes. The NSV MAC is currently working with Fire Safe Sonoma and the Sonoma Valley Fire District to complete a CWPP. This is where we'll probably insert the actual written.
That was my comment, yeah.
Protection plan for the Glen Ellen, Eldridge, and Kenwood communities, and look forward to working with the SVFD to achieve their wildfire preparedness objectives outlined in this grant proposal, which are in alignment with the NSV MAC emergency preparedness goals and the Sonoma Lake Napa unit's strategic plan. We are prepared to assist with public outreach to engage the community in the education programs and vegetation management workdays proposed by the SVFD. Please contact me if you have any questions or require more information about NSV MAC. Sincerely, you.
It feels weird to have my name at the bottom, but that's how it goes.
I assume it would be from the chair. So
yeah, yeah. If we want to, I'd be happy to have your name on there as well. But
I think it's best to have who is representing the MAC, and you're it.
Yep. So the other letter is almost identical. Is that right?
It is. It's just it's addressed to the CAL FIRE grants program.
Yeah. Any comments or questions for Mark about the letter? Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Yeah, it looks good, Mark. I do have one comment, and this is back to zip codes and who lives where. So I consider myself as a resident of the Glen Ellen community, but technically I live in the Rancho Madrone neighborhood in Sonoma, south of Madrone Road. Is it important to call that out? Again, what do we call the neighborhood? I call it Rancho Madrone. am I overthinking this? Is it, but I think it's important to me and people in my neighborhood to make that distinction and we are the southern boundary of the MAC. But I put it out there to the group. In this context, it may not be necessary, but I'm just putting that stake in the ground as that we are also part of the MAC and we are technically in Sonoma.
Yeah, well, this is great. I mean, I live in the Jack London Estates, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's where do
No,
we
but that's
draw the
Glen
line?
Ellen, Mark. I'm not in Glen Ellen. I'm
Oh,
not.
you're not
I guess I'm in the
technically?
community. So, and we're in the MAC. I mean,
So
we're part
how
of
did
the
you
MAC.
get on the MAC?
We're part of the southern boundary, right?
She has friends in high places.
This is a great question because again, I was just drawing on the kind of generality that the three communities that are listed in this letter comprise the MAC area, the geographic scope of our area. So I think that if that needs to be clarified, and other neighborhoods or communities need to be brought into the fold to be officially recognized as part of the MAC area, then we should do that.
Well,
I don't know
there
if
are
we
no
should
others,
do
I
that
don't
for this
think.
letter. I'll leave that up to Arthur.
Yeah, I will too. I mean, there are no other communities that are outside of Kenwood or Glen Ellen. There aren't any except for ours, and so I just want to make sure that we don't get forgotten in the mix, and if this becomes the common parlance, that we're not forgotten. But I do acknowledge that we're part of the community, so I leave it for you guys. I don't want to belabor this point. Maybe I already have, but there you go.
I think you're. I mean, to me, you're totally part of Glen Ellen. Your kids went to Dunbar. You ride with Neil Shepherd on Before Christmas in the wagon. Things like that. You're part of the community. So, maybe we'll work on the post office to rearrange the zip code down, stretch it down into your neighborhood. If people would want that. I don't know, that's a bigger question, but anyway, thanks, Kate. So, Angela. Oh,
do you have a separate zip code, Kate, or is it the same zip code as?
I have a Sonoma zip code. If you put a Glen Ellen, it's 25 yards away, but it won't deliver.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, I feel like you're part of the community. Just curious about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
any public comments on the letter?
First, Chair Dawson, Council Member or Vice Chair Handren had her hand up.
Oh, sorry. I'm
Had
sorry.
to hard without the video.
Yeah.
That's okay. I just wanted to say, Kate, in support of your position, that it's my understanding that the boundary, or the zip code boundary at least, has changed and crossed the street of Madrone Road several times over the years. And so in the past, at least the south side of Madrone Road has been Glen Ellen, but more recently it's Sonoma. So maybe it's that historical reference that brings you to the Glen Ellen community.
I didn't know that. Thank you, Vicki. Yeah. No, I appreciate you guys listening. I just want to make sure that the constituents in the neighborhood there, understand that they are represented by the MAC. That's clear to them.
All right. Thanks, Vicki and Kate. And any comments from the public?
Just giving it a few moments and not seeing any hands, Chair Dawson.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the letter of support for the fire department?
I move.
All right. And do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of sending the letter of support to the fire department as drafted, raise your hand.
Aye.
And all those opposed, say nay. All right. Unanimously passed. Okay, now we're going to move on to our annual report. And let's see. Well, let's put that up on screen. So Vice Chair Handren and I worked on that and drafted it, and hopefully it's got all the major things that we did, but we're certainly open to editing. And maybe, let's see, I'm thinking maybe I haven't thought about what the most efficient way to do this would be. Should we go through paragraph by paragraph and just give people like 30 seconds to a minute to read through the paragraph, and then any comments or changes? So let's do that. Let's take about a minute for that. Take 30 seconds on the first paragraph. Or would it be easier for me to read it out loud? Do people want to raise your hand if you want me to just read it out loud, and then I'll stop after each paragraph? So all in favor of having me read it out loud? Okay, we'll read it silently then. All right, any changes suggested for the first paragraph? And we'll take public comment at the end of council editing. All right, we'll move on to the second paragraph. All right, any comments or edits on the second paragraph? Okay, let's move on to the third paragraph. Any suggested changes on the third paragraph? And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. And then the next paragraph about Melissa Dowling resigning and her spot being replaced by Susan Oldroyd. All right. I don't see any edits on that one. And then the next paragraph about the letter to the supervisors. And we are going to be having an update on this, but we had to sort of cut it off at a certain point. So this is just more or less up through early January. And then here's, and thank you to Councilmember Handren for pulling this together, this meeting overview. All right, and then the ad hoc committees, we'll do the same thing. I'll tell you what, rather than me asking every time, we'll start a paragraph, and if you see anything you want to change, just raise your hand. And if I don't see any hands raised, then I'll just move on to the next one. Okay, let's move on to the second paragraph. Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser.
Just for clarification, this report is just through the end of the calendar year.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, it looks fine. This section looks fine to me.
All right, and then starting on the paragraph that begins with the partners. All right, moving on to the outreach ad hoc committee. And moving on to the events. I'm just going to go to the bottom of the page on this one. Okay, not seeing any hands up. And then this is just a list of direct outreach. And then now down to the SDC ad hoc. And now moving down to the Transportation and Safety Committee. And I think, oh, yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
I think you should put proposed cannabis dispensary. I would add the word cannabis. I mean, just to be clear as to what it is that that's being discussed at that last sentence.
Okay.
Limited parking at the proposed dispensary. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Matt. Any other comments? Okay, let's go to any comments or suggested edits from the public.
Through the chair, before that, I did want to
Councilmember Morgan.
Oh, that's what I was going to bring up.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to say that we had a pretty successful project in partnership with Sonoma County Water Agency and community outreach with drought signs. I mean, we might want to put that somewhere.
Oh, I thought, because he sent me an email about that and I said, let's just use your language. And
oh,
I
great.
Sent,
and
I
I
sent
sent
that
it to
in.
Hannah.
Yes,
Hannah,
I'll jump in through the chair. Councilmember Nardo Morgan did send that to me and I'm adding it right now. Oh, I'm
Okay,
not sharing
good.
my screen anymore. Sorry, I'll start sharing it again,
Okay,
then
no
you'll see it.
problem.
Where did that go? All right, there it is.
Great, yeah. All right, any comments on that? Thanks for the reminder, Angela. And now any members of the public have any comments or edits or?
And we do have one hand raised at this time, so I'll go ahead and share the timer slide. All right, and our first commenter is Elisa. Elisa, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome,
Hi
Elisa.
there. Hi, I don't know which page. I'll just start with a couple of things. I think in the ad hoc committees, it would be really nice if you move the dates to the front of the comment of the paragraph, because it gives people more of a sense of the timeline, but that's just up to you. I think under the Glen Ellen Village Fair, there's a couple of things you need to change. You have the tense is incorrect on the word draw versus drew, and residents should have an apostrophe after the last S. And then I will have one more. The tense in the, you need to change the tense in the STC ad hoc committee about the letter. If you're trying to make this something they're releasing now, because it's future tense or some other thing. It's not about the past. So those are my editorial comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Elisa. We'll take a look at that in a second. Is there another commenter, Hannah?
Yes, our next commenter is Bean. Bean, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Bean.
Thanks. Ad hoc, is it one word or two words? Because it's both in the document. So it should be consistent, whatever we think is appropriate.
Yeah, I believe I looked into that a while back. I believe it's usually one word.
Yeah. And then there's one place. Oh, what was the one you said?
The last part about crosswalks were painted, not sidewalks were painted.
It should be crosswalks or painted.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's one other spot in there, and I don't remember where it was, where you use the word which, and it should be that, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, that's not very helpful. So if we miss that, that's fine. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks, Bean. Any other comments?
We do. Next commenter is Alice. Alice, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi. No editorial comments from me. I just wanted to say that listening to the letter and seeing all that has been accomplished in this past year, I just really hats off to all of you. Thank you so much for your service. So many people really do appreciate everything that you're doing, and thank you very, very much, because it's, you know, sometimes it's a pain to get up there and have to write some big important letter or take care of something for everybody else. And anyway, just thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alice.
All right, and our next commenter is Tracy. Tracy, you should be able to unmute.
Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, so I'll remember what I wanted to say this time. I just looked it up online. Webster says ad hoc is 2 words.
Huh.
And I also just want to echo what Alice said. Way back when we talked about the Glen Ellen Forum and the a MAC as being 2 wings of the same bird, the Glen Ellen bird. And with everything that you guys are doing, with everything that the Glen Ellen Forum is doing in terms of education, yeah, Glen Ellen has taken wing, and it's really encouraging. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Tracy. And I share those sentiments. Yeah, it's.
And Chair Dawson, there are no more hands.
Okay, can we see the letter? And we'll just, let's just go through and we'll just make the changes, unless if any council member disagrees, you can just raise your hands or start yelling and we'll know. So I have, all right, Hannah, if you have a list, we can go through yours, or I made a list here.
I tried to jot down notes. The first I have is that on the Ad Hoc Committee page.
The dates.
Yes.
I mean, I hear what Elisa was saying, but I also think it would take a fair bit of rearranging to make that work. So I'm inclined to leave it. Anybody disagree? Okay, so Elisa, we appreciate your comment. We're going to leave those as they are. And then you have a comment about drew people to the fair booth. Let's see, which.
That's that comment, I think, too. That could be that drew hundreds, and then the residents has a
Sure.
possessive there.
Yeah. Does anybody disagree with making that change? Change it to.
I think that's the one
drew.
that Bean comment. You don't need a comma if you really got to get picky.
Yeah.
And residents' concerns could have the
Oh yeah,
on the end.
right. And then let's see. And then we change all the ad hocs to one word. Which
that one is probably time consuming and that I can do with a find and replace later. So I will do
yeah,
that.
you can just, yeah, that's no problem. I'm fine with that. And then the crosswalks. Let's see,
this
where
right
was
here.
that? Yeah. Yeah. Darn, I wanted to get the sidewalks painted. We ended up getting the crosswalks. I just joking.
And I have a note about a tense in the SGC ad hoc. Do you have that too?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I don't recall exactly what it was.
I think it was about the future. Let's see, let me see, it was formed. Okay, since writing a letter. Well, at the time this was drafted, it was something that was in process. So I think in my mind, that's accurate as far as the letter goes. Yeah, I mean, if it just goes through the end of the year, this looks okay to me on a quick skim of it. Does anybody think it should be changed? Okay, I think
if I may make a suggestion, you could just say at a special MAC meeting scheduled for January 5th or something, you know.
Okay, sure.
Confirm that it hasn't occurred yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and this report can have, maybe have December 31st, 2021 or January 1st, something that's just signals it's the end of the year. All right, anything else? I think we covered all the comments. Do I have a motion to accept the letter? Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser?
Motion to approve the
Okay, yeah.
report as written.
Yeah, with the one change of making ad hoc one word. So we have a motion. I see Councilmember Eagles has seconded that. Everybody in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
And anybody not in favor? Okay, it passed unanimously. So we have our letter for the supervisors, our annual letter. And it was encouraging to put it all down on paper, like a couple of people mentioned, just to see how much we'd actually accomplished in just a little over a year. Okay, now we're going to move on to what maybe the most time-consuming part of this meeting, but maybe not. Things are going pretty smoothly so far. So we have the SDC ad hoc update and next steps, and we have. So I don't know how much of this. Sorry, I'm not speaking very well. I had a little more in my mind when I was put this down, but this doesn't really explain exactly what we're doing. But so we're going to get the update, and then I've asked the SDC Ad Hoc Committee to draft a scoping letter. So we're going to help them brainstorm that, and at our next meeting in March, we will look at the draft, probably live edit it, and then approve it. Hopefully, approve it for sending into Permit Sonoma. So that'll be next month. But this month, we're just going to get an update and then brainstorm kind of a framework or topics for the scoping letter. And joining us tonight, we have Vicki Hill, who's our local Glen Ellen resident and professional planner. Thank you for being here, Vicki. And before we get to Vicki, Councilmember Eagles is just going to give us a quick update on what has happened since we sent out the letter in early January.
Thanks, Chair Dawson. Yeah, and thank you, Vicki. I'll keep it short so we can keep moving here. But it seems like a lot of time has passed by, but it was just at our mid-January meeting where we actually formally approved. Well, that's not true. It was at a special meeting on the 6th when we actually approved our letter. But we wanted to give you a quick update and on what's happened to that letter since then. As you know, it had a pretty extensive CC list, which I won't go through because I think we've talked about that in our mid-January meeting. And I thank Arthur and I think Vicki probably too for getting the letter out pretty extensively to our CC list and to the local media, Press Democrat, IT, and Kenwood Press. And there was also a petition started in support of the letter, which has garnered close to 1,600 signatures, about 300 in Glen Ellen, 600 in Sonoma, etc. 300 elsewhere in Sonoma County, etc. And I believe that was in this most current version of the Kenwood Press. And the letter has been endorsed by lots of folks, including the Sonoma City Council, the Glen Ellen Historical Society, the Oakmont Village Homeowners Association, Sonoma Land Trust, Sonoma Mountain Preserve, Valley of the Moon Alliance, and most recently by the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission. That was just last week, if I recall correctly, and I was there, I should know, and that it had unanimous support. So that was great. So that's sort of where we are. But please, others who are a little closer to this outreach, the Ad Hoc Committee certainly pulled the letter together, but others have been responsible for helping get it out there. So did I miss anything that we should include, Arthur, before I turn it over to Vicki?
I can't think of anything. Yeah.
Other
I was very pleased with the reception it's gotten, and we've gotten buy-in from all the representative bodies in the valley. The Springs MAC didn't explicitly endorse the letter, but their letter is very closely aligned with what we put in ours. So I don't feel like there's any real conflict between what they wrote and what we wrote. So we're all pretty much in alignment, and that's what we want. We want the community to be together on this as much as possible. And I think we've done that. We've developed that. And so thanks again to the SDC committee for pulling the letter together, and to everybody else for hanging in there for some long meetings to get that drafted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So Vicki Hill is going to tell us more about what's coming up next. And some of this if you've seen her at a couple other meetings recently, you may have heard some of this stuff. And I think that's fine, because I know for me, this is all new. So the more times I hear it, the better I understand it. And, it's a whole different world than I've ever really, even though I've been doing a lot of stuff in the environmental field, I haven't really been involved in EIRs directly very much. So I'm definitely on a learning curve, and I appreciate Vicki bringing her expertise to share with us and help us brainstorm the next letter. All right, Vicki.
Okay, thank you, Chair Dawson. I would like to go over the SDC specific plan, the EIR process, that's the environmental impact report process, and give just a very quick background on what an EIR is and why we do one, and then focus my comments on the scoping process, which is where we are now. We're just embarking on that, and explain a little bit about that and why it's important and what you can do to be part of it. So starting off, what is CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, and why do we do EIRs, environmental impact reports? The objectives of CEQA is to inform governmental decision makers and the public about the potential significant adverse effects of a proposed activity, such as the specific plan, to identify ways to reduce or avoid environmental damage that could result from that plan, to prevent significant avoidable environmental damage by requiring changes in a project, and finally, to provide opportunities for other agencies and the public to review and comment on a project. And that last one is very important. An EIR is required when the lead agency determines the project would potentially have one or more significant impacts. And so an EIR follows a certain format. It has a project description, it has the environmental setting where the project occurs, and then it looks at impacts, and very importantly, it must require an analysis of alternatives to the proposed project or to its location that would attain most, not necessarily all, of the project objectives and would avoid or reduce any significant effects of the project. So remember that about alternatives. I'm going to hit on that a little bit later. The EIR process in a nutshell starts with scoping. That's where we are now. Then the draft EIR and the draft specific plan will be prepared, followed by a 45-day public comment period and likely a hearing on the EIR and specific plan. And then a final EIR is prepared. There's no formal comment period on that, but the EIR must respond to comments made on the draft EIR. And then finally, a certification of the EIR and approval of the specific plan by the County Board of Supervisors. Now, something that's critical to understand is that an EIR won't tell us if a project should be approved. It doesn't make project recommendations. It identifies environmental impacts and mitigation measures. And the county is the decision maker. It may approve a project that has impacts or reject a project that does not have significant impacts. So keep that in mind. It's not a decision document in EIR. So let's talk about scoping. The purpose of scoping is to solicit comments regarding the scope or content of the EIR. So in other words, what needs to be analyzed in the EIR and how should it be analyzed? What alternatives and what potential environmental impacts should be studied? That's the purpose of scoping. The scoping process starts with issuance of a notice of preparation, otherwise known as the NOP. Sorry for all the jargon. The NOP solicits comments on the scope of the EIR and must be issued for, must allow not less than 30 days to respond to that NOP. And then there's always or usually a scoping meeting. And in the case of SDC, the NOP was issued last week, and the scoping meeting is tomorrow evening at 5:30 p.m. It's a virtual meeting, and you can find out about that by going to the county's website, which is sdcspecificplan.com, and there'll be information there. So what is a notice of preparation? The NOP is a document stating that an EIR will be prepared for the project. It's the first step in the EIR process, and the primary focus is notifying local and state public agencies about the project. The issuance of the NOP and responses to the NOP mark the beginning of the administrative record for the EIR. So comments submitted prior to this step are not required to be addressed by the planning team in the EIR. That's why it's important to respond to the NOP and submit scoping comments. I know we're doing it all over again, but it is important that we do that. The NOP has a brief description of the proposed project and a location of the project on a map and a list of potential environmental issues. So let's talk about the SDC NOP a little bit. The plan provides a very limited amount of project description information and no site plan. This makes it somewhat difficult for state agencies and the public to make meaningful comments on what should be studied in the EIR. For example, without a site plan, we don't know where housing units would be placed or how big the proposed setback is for wildlife corridor or the amount or location of non-residential development. Here's a quick summary of what the NOP contains. And again, you can find that on the SDC specific plan website. So the project description in the NOP includes the following: a housing development program ranging from 450 to 1,000 residential units, a non-housing development program, including institutional office research and development and other creative uses, parks and community gathering spaces within the core campus, potential creation of a new road to connect Arnold to Highway 12, and other community facilities, as well as the open space preservation. So now let's talk about what scoping comments are and what they are not. And Hannah, you were going to share the screen. I think I have a one-page document for people to look at. Thank you. Okay, EIR scoping comments. The purpose of scoping comments and submitting them is to inform the county of environmental concerns and alternatives that should be addressed in the EIR. As I said, it marks the beginning of the administrative record for the EIR. So here are some important notes. Like I mentioned before, you need to resubmit comments regarding environmental issues and alternatives. It doesn't matter if you submitted concerns earlier in the process, the county's not required to consider them unless sent in as scoping comments during this 45-day period of time. What to include in the comments? Focus on EIR issues, air quality, traffic, visual, noise, the likes of that, not on whether you like or dislike the project. That's not the purpose of scoping comments. Things like community sentiments, property values, and most economic considerations are not EIR issues under CEQA. So remember that as you go through and write your comments. Review and address the project description contained in the NOP, not some previous version of the 3 alternatives. It's important to focus on what's in the NOP, even though we don't have a site plan. Comments should identify the following: environmental issues, alternatives that should be included in the EIR analysis, and provide as many specifics as possible, because they will use that information to craft alternatives to the proposed project. And for example, we will, I would think that people would want the 450 units of housing that was referenced in the MAC letter to be considered part of the project and not considered as just an alternative. So we want that to have the full analysis. Other things that you can recommend are methodologies that should be used in the EIR analysis, environmental thresholds or significance criteria to measure impacts, mitigation measures, and then finally, information sources or studies that should be consulted. Perhaps you know of a biological resource study or survey that was conducted that the planning team might not know about. As I mentioned, there's a 45-day deadline. Comments must be submitted to the county. Oh, well, it's not 30 days, it's 45 days. And the comments are to be submitted to Brian O at the PRMD. The scoping meeting is tomorrow and you can make comments there, but as we all know, the comment time is usually limited to 1 or 2 minutes, so it's best to submit written comments. It might be informative to attend the meeting though, to hear what others have to say and to learn more about the project from the county planning team. Finally, CEQA does not require the county to respond to individual scoping comment letters, but it does require the county and the consultant to consider those comments in preparing the EIR. So that's scoping in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have and offer any other advice you might need.
Matt, I'll get to you in just a second. So Vicki, when we talked earlier, you said that it's important to remember that there's another comment period after the draft EIR comes out. So this is not our only chance.
Yeah, correct. So this is just scoping, and you know, like I said, the focus is on contacting the local and state agencies that have jurisdiction over the project. Of course, members of the public can comment too, but it's not our job to you know, to identify every single issue that needs to be analyzed. I'm sure that the planning team is you know, well informed about the topics, but there may be a specific issue that has not been mentioned so far that you feel feels important, but you do not have to you know, present everything you know that you're thinking about in the EIR now, because when the draft EIR is published, you will have 45 days, at least 45 days, to review the EIR and make comments on the EIR and all of its contents, and make comments about whether you think it's sufficient or not. I hope that.
Thanks, Vicki. Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
The details are vague. How do they get away with that? I mean, how can you specifically address something where the details, like the site plan, are, I mean, seemingly deliberately avoided?
That's a good question, Matt. It's not totally unusual when doing a general plan or a specific plan that they don't have more details. And something I should note is that this is a program EIR. It is not a project specific EIR. So when I say program EIR, it will look at the whole of the project. It will not go in and analyze every individual housing unit that's being proposed. It looks at the total development on the site. And so the PRMD staff, the planning staff, indicated that they wanted to maintain some flexibility in the project description, and that's why they have not yet defined a site plan. Now, when the EIR is published, they will have to have site plans for each of the alternatives, because you can't do the analysis without knowing how much and where the different uses are going to be. But for right now, you're right. You can look back at the alternatives report or at the project description that was presented to the board on January 25th to get an idea of the types of uses that they're thinking about and the general locations. But again, what they present in the EIR may be something different than that.
Thanks, Vicki. And I think Councilmember Oldroyd, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I was curious on who is creating the report, the EIR. Is that the county?
The consultant for the specific plan, Diet and Bhatia, is doing both the specific plan and the EIR.
Oh, thanks.
And Councilmember Das?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Can you go a little bit more about the 450 homes that were recommended by the MAC? And you mentioned them in your areas that they will have to be addressed in a little different way for the EIR to make sure that they're included. Can you define a little bit more what you're talking about there?
Sure. The board directed staff at the January 25th meeting to study 450 to 700 or 800 homes. And the planning team did something a little bit different. They established a range of 450 to 1,000 homes that they said they would look at. And we're not clear on whether the 450 homes is going to be an alternative or that's going to be part of the project, if they're just going to look at a range as part of the project. So my comment is that I would encourage them to look at the full range as part of the proposed project, that they maybe break it up in increments or somehow give equal analysis to 450 as well as 1,000 homes.
How do we make that happen? Because that was a major point of our paper and our position was the 450. How do we, other than saying, no, we want you to focus on 450. I'm unclear about how it is that Permit Sonoma was able to raise it by 250 homes on their own.
I can't answer that question. I mean, there were several board members that gave direction. The planning team, felt that they still needed to study the full amount. I can't answer that question, but I can say that the MAC may want to submit comments consistent with their letter before, encouraging the county to study the 450 units as part of the proposed project.
And thank you for that warning.
Thank you. And Councilmember Handren and then Councilmember Newhouser.
Sure, thank you. You mentioned that the county's or the planning department is required to consider the comments that are given, but how much weight do they have to give those comments? And if there are multiple comments on the same issue, do they have to then, does that give the comment more weight?
I can't really answer that question. I mean, in my mind as a land use planner, if I was doing the analysis, if there were multiple people making the same comment and bringing up an issue, I would certainly probably take a more careful look at it. But I don't know how they are going to weight the comments. I can't answer for the planning team on how they're going to approach the analysis. But I mean, if you think something's important, you know, submit it. You know, I don't know what else to say. I can't second guess how the planning team is going to approach it, but under law, they do have to consider all the scoping comments. And usually they attach the scoping comments or provide reference to those either as an appendix to the EIR or make them available for review on their website someplace.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you.
And Councilmember Newhouser?
Thank you. Yeah, I had the same question because I guess you can't really count on separating the politics from this when it's every comment's supposed to count. So I guess that's a clue that everyone should comment, even if it's repetitive. But I did have a couple of questions. It sounded like you referred to the letter, Vicki, that we submitted in the appendix. Would you recommend that we use that appendix and the topic areas that we had selected and build upon that with our additional comments?
Yes, to the extent that those topics are related to environmental impact report issues.
Okay.
I haven't looked at the letter for a few weeks, so I'd have to go back and look at it again. But yeah, to the extent that those are EIR issues.
Okay, and then and say we were following that template, would you suggest adding in the criteria, the recommended thresholds, even if say we're not experts in that area? I mean, this is the question is like, how do you make these recommendations for mitigation measures or thresholds unless you're actually a scientist or trained in that land use planning? Or should we just go for it?
It's not essential. It's not necessary because it's not your job to do the analysis for the EIR. It's your job to bring up the issues that need to be analyzed in the EIR. I don't know. I mean, yeah, if you don't know of specific mitigation measures or thresholds, then yeah, how can you recommend them? I mean, that's not your job.
Okay.
I'm just going to jump in real quick here with your comment about taking our letter and then applying, looking for possible EIR issues. And I'm looking at the NOP on page 5. It has a probable environmental effects, and it says that here's a whole list of probably more than a dozen environmental issue areas that will be addressed in the EIR. So it's got like aesthetics, air quality, noise and vibration. So I'm wondering if the obvious approach to me would seem to be to take that list and take our letter and just, I mean, could you organize the letter under each one of those topics and say, okay, under aesthetics, we want you to study the impact on the rural character of Glen Ellen, under air quality, what's impact of whatever vehicles are going to be. Would that be an organizing way to organize the whole thing?
Sure. And I don't think you have to comment on every single topic if you don't have something to say about it.
Yeah.
You can focus on those key areas that you think they may have missed something, in their previous analysis. Remember that in the alternatives report, there was some environmental assessment of certain topical areas. And you might want to go back and take a look at that. Of course, that's going to be expanded upon in the EIR, but that is providing the basis for the environmental setting and the impact analysis.
I just had one final question.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser.
Yeah, I was wondering, Vicki, are you aware of a consolidated list of changes that were made to the most recent version of the alternative that's being proposed?
No, I mean, we don't know what alternatives.
Well,
I
they
mean,
did say that they made certain changes in their presentation. I just thought maybe there might be that information may be available.
well, they made changes in the presentation that they made to the board on January 25th.
Mhm.
But we don't know if that's the project description that's going to be used in the EIR. We can only go by what's in the notice of preparation, which has some text identifying the types of uses. And it doesn't identify the amount or location of the non-residential uses, and it only identifies numbers for the residential uses. So we, they could change it from what they presented to the board. We really don't know what's going to be the proposed project,
Okay,
other than that text that's in there.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the difficult part.
Councilmember Dickey?
Vicky, looking forward just a little bit. My understanding of this process is that an EIR is going to look at the impacts of the proposed project at its largest scale. And then they have to include in their EIR report a alternative that has reduced impacts based on the studies that are done on the maximum impacts. And then they also have to have a study or a proposal that says no plan at all. Is that correct? Am I interpreting that properly?
Yes, that's correct, Matt. And one thing to remember is that the purpose of alternatives is to look at changes to the plan that could reduce significant impacts of the proposed project. Now, if the proposed project doesn't have any significant impacts, then that makes it, a little bit different. But I'm assuming that in one of those issue areas, there may be a significant impact. But yeah, you have the process down, and that's why developing the alternatives sometimes doesn't come about until they're partway through the environmental review process, when they determine what those significant impacts are.
So follow-up question. We proposed in our MAC document a density of roughly 450 homes. If you were to negotiate a business deal, which is part of what this appears to be, and we didn't really want them to go and exceed 450, is it worthwhile to lower the number of homes that we find acceptable, so that if they decide, well, we're going to negotiate with these, with an EIR report and with the community and all, will we lower the number so that if they decide they're going to compromise, they have to start at a lower number? Do you understand what I'm asking? I mean, we proposed 450, and I'm going, well, hell, if they're going to negotiate it upwards to 6 or 7, then why don't we propose a lower number so that they don't have so much wiggle room to a higher density?
You can propose whatever you think is appropriate as the MAC. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will consider that in the EIR. They don't have to study every alternative that's suggested, and alternatives must achieve at least some of the project objectives, and an important one is economic feasibility. So the EIR also has the ability to dismiss alternatives that aren't feasible. And so we need to be careful that whatever alternative you're suggesting is a feasible alternative. But that's a political decision, for you to decide what number you want to recommend. I can't say.
Thanks.
I'm just going to jump in momentarily. I believe we had 400 to 450. So we might, if we had that in the document, then we could go down to 400 if that seems right. Just a comment. Councilmember Doss.
Yes, thank you again. A question regarding the already decided discussion item regarding traffic. I think when you were reading off different areas that Permit Sonoma has already included, traffic is one of them. My question is really, that would mean then, and specifically the new corridor, vehicle corridor from SDC over to Highway 12, a new corridor. Does that mean we don't need to include that in our letter because that's already going to be discussed? Or should we include our thoughts in regards to that corridor in our letter or our scope comments?
I would suggest, I mean, that the road is an option right now. It's not a done deal. And I don't know whether it'll be included, in all the alternatives or some of the alternatives, but you could certainly identify the types of issues that should be looked at in assessing that new road. What are the impacts of that new road that you think are important to evaluate in the EIR? Does that make sense?
Well, very much so. My concern is that even at 450 new housing units, I come from a fire evacuation preparedness issue background in this situation. And even at 450 new housing units, if you consider 2 automobiles per unit, that's almost 1,000 new cars, additional cars that have to be evacuated. And so how are they going to get out of Glen Ellen, Kenwood? That's an issue. And so that's what I'm trying to understand is what are automatically going to be proposed? You're correct. In the first 3, alternative A, B, and C, only alternative C, I think it was, included a new vehicle corridor from SDC over to Highway 12. I don't know that we would support a new vehicle corridor, but we have to have some way, even at 450, to move those cars in case of evacuation.
So, but you bring up a really good point, and emergency evacuation, emergency routes, that won't necessarily be studied as part of the traffic analysis, but it should be studied as emergency response or public safety under that category. And you could certainly make comments that that type of study to look at the vehicle load on local roadways, what that is in the event of an emergency evacuation in the area.
Thank you for that clarification, because I assumed it would be in the traffic section, but it's not. So not necessarily so. So we need to be very clear about emergency preparedness, evacuation routes, et cetera.
Sure, right.
Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
Vicky, thank you. Just first of all, thank you so much. Very clear. And I have documents piled on my desk trying to understand the context for all this. And this is the clearest presentation I have. So thank you. The other thing, and so back to what Damon was talking about in terms of evacuation plans and traffic, one of the things that I understand is that you can request that an EIR also study the impacts of projects within a certain radius of the site. For instance, we've heard that Hannah Boys Center is going to be developed. We know that the old Eagle Ranch project is going to go forward. The golf course is talking about expansion. While those projects are not necessarily proposals at the Permit Sonoma offices at this point. We know that there's murmurings of them. How do you make sure that they study those as obvious impacts that would be associated with SDC and other projections that they would make?
Good question. So that's a cumulative impact, and CEQA requires the assessment of cumulative impacts. You can submit as part of your comments a list of projects that you feel should be considered. Under CEQA, and there's case law about this, the other projects have to be reasonably foreseeable. And I don't know if that means, I don't think it means, well, I don't want to speak, I'm not an attorney, but it has to be a reasonably foreseeable project. It can't be speculative. I don't know what the status of the Hannah Boy Center project is. But for example, the new resort that's going in at Graywood Ranch, that's not speculative, that's happening now. And so that's reasonably foreseeable. And I think that there's, projects in the city of Sonoma that are going on that would contribute to traffic. So you're certainly entitled, to write comments about those types of projects. That is a good scoping comment.
Do we have to know specifically what they might be? I mean, it's probably helpful, but I mean, for instance, we may know more about what's going on in the county and locally than we do within the city boundaries of Sonoma. How specific do we have to be if we're requesting something be considered?
It's always good to be as specific as possible, but if you don't have that specificity, then you do what you can in your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Vicki, when we were talking earlier today, you were saying that one thing that we should do, we want them to study basically the we can call it the MAC alternative, the 450 homes, the one that's outlined in the letter, and that we should really specify what that looks like. Let's just say 450 homes, wildlife permeable campus, dark sky lighting. We could make a whole list of those things. And as I understood it, that's almost like a separate thing. Like we should have that as almost a standalone thing to go with our EIR scoping comments. Did I get that right?
It's still a scoping comment.
Mm-hmm.
There's two main parts of scoping comments. One, identifying alternatives that should be analyzed in the EIR. And then secondly, identifying issues that should be studied in the EIR, both for the proposed project and alternatives. So spell out your alternative and be as specific as possible. I don't know if you said anything in your letter about location of, housing units or location of other uses. And I don't know if you can provide that specificity, but if you have that information, that, if you have consensus on that, that'd be great too.
Thanks.
Or like things like wildlife corridor, what you recommend for a setback for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of different issues that you can identify as part of your alternative.
And Councilmember Morgan.
Hi, thank you, Arthur. Vicki, again, I want to say just what Matt said, which is it was incredibly helpful and so clear. Thank you so much. I really learned a lot. And I feel like you really started actually to help us write this letter. You've outlined it for us. So that is really great. I have a question about, I don't really even know if you can actually answer this, but you made the comment earlier that this is not exactly a decision document that they can they don't even, whatever we give them, I don't know if they don't have to look at it or they don't decide it. I wonder if you, and who are the final decision makers in this? I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
So the EIR does not make a recommendation to approve or deny the project. It identifies the impacts, it identifies mitigation measures, and it identifies an environmentally superior alternative that could either be the proposed project or another alternative. And then it's up to staff to make recommendations to the board. Now, in this case, it will go to the Planning Commission first, but ultimately the Board of Supervisors will be making the decision on the specific plan. And they first must certify the EIR as being complete and adequate. And then once they do that, they can take action on the specific plan. Now, if there are significant impacts identified in the EIR, they can still approve the specific plan by making a statement of overriding considerations. And it's a series of findings that they would make as part of their approval of the specific plan. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember Newhouser.
Yes, to that point, would the financial feasibility be declared an overriding consideration? And is that the point at which the superior, the environmentally superior project would then be tossed out?
Let me make sure I understand. What you're saying is that could they make an overriding consideration for economic feasibility?
Yeah, because you said that at any point that or at some point the environment, the EIR could be overridden by that one requirement of the project.
Yeah, the EIR is not overridden. I mean, but they could make a finding to not approve the environmentally superior project based on these findings. And the findings can include a number of things, and economic feasibility, I'm not sure. I suppose it could be, because they can make a finding of that it's good for the public welfare. That's one of the findings that they can make. But if an alternative is not feasible, then it's likely that the EIR would dismiss that alternative earlier in the process if it's not economically feasible.
Well, I think we have to be prepared for that reality, that if, and they've said this all along, the 450 homes is just not economically feasible, and that could just get set aside during the scoping process. Is that possible?
Well, I can't say what. I mean, well, I guess so. I mean, it is possible, but there's been a lot of comments submitted about their economic feasibility analysis too, that about assumptions that are used in that.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that, so the economic assumptions are, is that, I mean, I'm far from an expert in that kind of thing. So how do we get, I'm not sure how to put this. How do we get somebody who knows what they're doing to put that into the EIR? Like we, use this algorithm or whatever.
You can make comments about that, but economic considerations or economic impacts are not usually analyzed in an EIR. That's not an environmental issue that's analyzed. The economic analysis was in the alternatives report. And, there were a lot of comments submitted, and some of them on that. And you could continue to, question what is in the alternatives report. but I don't know to what detail they're going to address any of that in the EIR. They will address it in the specific plan itself, and you will have the opportunity to make comments on the plan itself. When the draft plan has to come out with the draft EIR, they'll be coming out together.
Okay, thanks. Council member Eagles, and then we'll go to Matt.
Yeah, thanks for all this, Vicki. So question about traffic vehicle miles traveled and the assumptions made about the commercial space. Is it appropriate in this to request different scenarios? I think there's some assumption that there'll be more live work than is actually practical from my early point of view at this stage. Is it appropriate to get them to look at that at different levels, if you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
if you feel that the assumptions, are not valid that they used in the alternatives report, and I assume that those are going to be carried forward. I don't know. They may make adjustments to those assumptions based on the comments, but you absolutely those types of comments are appropriate to make about, and that gets to the methodology that's used for that analysis.
Okay, and even if you can't be necessarily specific on what methodology they should use, you can appropriately comment that the methodology should be X, Y, Z,
Yes.
or not. Okay. And just a comment to you, Chair Dawson, before we go to public comment, I would just like to talk for a little bit about process issues, but I'll wait for my colleagues to comment on to ask Vicki more questions before we go to that. But
okay, yeah.
I'd like to comment again. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. And Matt?
I had the opportunity to question some county officials and participants very specifically about the economic assumptions. And none of them could offer clarity on where those numbers came from. They are, in all reality, fictional projections. The other thing that needs to be kept in mind is that any financial feasibility is related to the purchase price of the property, and that has not been publicly disclosed. So again, the projections that they have made at the county level based on, their financial projections, they could be based on a potential purchase price that's been established, but that has not been revealed to us. So the likelihood is that these projections are based on the mitigation measures that are related to the neglect of the property. And they're making those assumptions based on, hey, it's going to cost X number of millions of dollars to clean this site up. And in order for a developer to take the site over, they need to make enough money to clean that stuff up.
Thanks, Matt. So yeah, Councilmember Eagles, so I'm open to however you want to run this next part, but are you and the other committee members feeling like you have enough information more or less to start on drafting the letter? Or do you want more input from the rest of the council, and then we'll get input from the public as well?
Okay, well, let's just take a moment. And so as we know, this process is a little challenging, right? Because this is our moment to really sort of talk together because of Brown Act. And so what I'm hearing is that we should be identifying the alternatives that we'd like to see measured if they're in the NOP, right? If they make sense based on the NOP. If they're not there, they probably don't. And identifying the issues, identifying the alternatives, and identifying the potential issues and measurement tools to assess those issues. I think that's what I'm hearing. So there's sort of two parts that can be integrated, but there are two portions to that. But I want to make clear this is our moment. So for example, Vicki said, we're probably, unless we can do it right now, not going to get any more specific than we were in our MAC letter for things like location of housing units and wildlife corridor specific, because we just aren't able to work together on this, right? So I'm open to other suggestions on how we can work on how we can do this process-wise that will expand our knowledge base, but we are challenged here. I want to acknowledge that. And the good thing is this is not our only bite of the apple, right? But we will do our best. So with that in mind, with those caveats in mind, yes, I think I'll defer to Matt and to Angela too, if they need more information. And of course, public has a chance to comment, but I just, want to be clear on the limitations as I was for the last exercise, which was the letter.
I have one question for Vicky, follow up on that. So Vicky, if let's say that somebody on the committee was able to put together a site plan that had 450 housing units and, various things, created what they thought was a permeable campus, et cetera, et cetera. Is that worth doing? Is it worth it to put together something that's that specific?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, you already have the basic elements of that alternative, right? Are you saying
Right.
to actually draw a plan, or I'm not?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, I'll just, like I was just fooling around one day and I thought, okay, what would it take to get, this plan down to 450 units? And I looked at, I go, okay, let's take out some of the housing along that's close to the creek, because that seems like that's prime habitat and wildlife passage. And, it took me an hour. It wasn't anything in depth, but I managed to get it down to about 450. So I thought, well, there's a lot of aspects to it, but anyway, so I'm just wondering if that kind of an exercise would be worthwhile to submit, if assuming that we were able to come up with something that met what, we would like to see in the alternative, to submit that with our letter.
Sure. Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, right now, I don't think that none of the alternatives or the proposal that was submitted and presented to the board, none of those were focused on 450 units. I mean, I haven't seen a plan with 450 units. They're going to have to develop one, since they committed to doing that in the NOP. So yeah, I mean, if I were a land use planner, it'd be great to have somebody, to give me, what they're thinking and, some concepts.
So I guess the follow-up question for Hannah would be then, if, could we, I'd be happy to give what it's just kind of almost a back of the envelope kind of thing, but I'd be happy to pass that along to the committee. Would that be a violation of the Brown Act, or could we just say anybody that wants to submit a plan to the committee could do that, and then they can, vet those and present whatever they want to. Maybe they want to integrate a couple of them, or they want to take their favorite one and submit that with a letter when we look at it. I'm just trying to figure out how much we can do who aren't on the committee.
Sure, through the chair. Good question. I may have to double check and circle back with you on that. We could have on the March agenda separate items. One is the Ad Hoc Committee bringing forth this letter that you'll have a chance to review and comment on. And the other is, if you, Chair Dawson, wanted to have an item regarding, it sounds like a map or something you want to draw, that's separate. But in terms of you plus the 3 members of the ad hoc, that would be 4 people working on one thing and be a quorum. And I will double check and circle back with you. I'm just thinking out loud in response to your question now.
Yeah, I wasn't really intending to work with the committee, just to submit something to the committee, but or if not another MAC member, maybe the public could do that.
If any public comments, Mark is raising his hand. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt. I understand you need to clarify this, but my understanding from the Brown Act presentation that we got at the previous meeting, And I even asked about this specifically because this was one of the limiting factors for our last exercise in writing the letter for this. My understanding here, and others can corroborate this, is that if we say whoever's writing the committee, ad hoc committees, preparing a draft letter, that can be submitted to the rest of the MAC as long as it's posted publicly. And so I think that's why we've been doing this exercise when I submitted the letters also get put online. So and I think that was that electronic exception that allows us to do that. We're not having meetings. We're not having a quorum-based meeting. It's more about sharing information so that we can all participate in the evaluation and submitting comments, so that we can add content that can then be used by the ad hoc committee to develop the letter. I think that's, you could clarify that with our legal counsel, but I'm really sure based on what was the response of the expert that presented to us, it seemed like she provided a means by which we can share information as long as it's posted publicly.
Yeah, that's absolutely, we can post on the MAC's website. I guess it sort of sounded like there would be a little more back and forth and refining an exchange that wasn't happening in a public meeting, is how I interpreted it as at first.
It could get a little messy, but I mean, this is content that we're willing to share publicly, and I mean, anyway. But I do have a question for Kate about process. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I wanted us to talk about that, but I also realized there's the process about how we want to go about developing this letter. And then there's and how much of that's going to take place in tonight's meeting, which I'm hoping we'll get to. But then there's also the process of this meeting itself and the opportunity for public comment based on Vicky's presentation. I don't know if we need to do that or if we move right into working on this letter.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure, Hannah, do you have a sense of if we need to move? I mean, I'm happy to move into public comment, and I'm also aware that we kind of have some momentum going, and that it might make sense to go into. Actually, before I ask you that question, so Kate, what would you like to have happen at this point?
Well, I want to be respectful of Vicky's time too. So if public comment is very specific to Vicky's presentation, we should get on with it.
Yeah.
Then we can carry on with the discussion of the letter, if that would be one possibility.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, then, if there's no objection, I'm going to open it up to public comment.
All right, and we do have some folks raising their hands, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. And the first commenter is Nancy.
Welcome, Nancy.
You should be able to unmute.
Good evening. Hi, Arthur. In looking through the NOP, I noticed a couple of things that I think we need to bring to their attention. One of which is that in the cover sheet, it has sort of the very basic check off the boxes stuff. Under development type, it says residential 1,000. It doesn't say 450 to 1,000, it says 1,000. That's, do you know what I'm talking about? Notice of completion, environmental document transmittal, and then it goes down project title and it has all these check boxes. Okay, and then farther down, it says project issues discussed in the document. And they've checked off all these boxes. They did not check off drainage and absorption and the wetlands, and the fact that they are creating more hardscape both need to be addressed. So that should be in there. And they did not include schools and universities. And if we are going to have a discussion about moving Dunbar School, or if we want to start a trade school, or we would like to have some kind of a educational institute there connected with some university or something. They should be debating, that should be included in here. And then vegetation, they didn't include, and we've got riparian vegetation, fire safety vegetation, wetlands vegetation. I mean, there's so many different issues under that. And then finally, and most annoying, they did not check cumulative effects. And as Vicky said, there are numerous cumulative effects, and we should be insisting that that be included in what they're addressing. And then when they checked the various organizations and agencies, I'm going to run out of time. They should have included Fish and Game because they oversee living with wildlife, and they should have included construction of public schools and food and agriculture, perhaps.
Thanks, Nancy. I just want to ask Vicky a quick clarification question. I didn't see the document that Nancy's talking about in the, I'm looking at the notice of preparation. I didn't see those boxes, but I'm guessing they're on the notice of completion. Is that correct? And is that something we should be concerned about at this point?
The notice of completion is a form that they send to the state clearinghouse. I think it's fine to make comments about that. In the notice of preparation, there's also a list of issues, correct? I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do they list cumulative in the notice of preparation? I mean, it's fine for you to make comments on that because that notice of completion form is a form that I think also gets sent out to the various local and state agencies. And so if you want to, you know, point out some issues in it, I think that's fine. But I would focus mainly on the notice of preparation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Vicky. And thanks, Nancy, for pointing those out because those are troubling to know that those are in there. Okay, next public comment.
Next commenter is David. David, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, David.
Hello, yes. In terms of cumulative effects, another project which is well along is the Krug Hotel and Affordable Housing Project on Verano, the site of the former Paul's Resort. And in terms of financial feasibility, they should include potential funding for grants for affordable housing. And alternatives, you should recommend an alternative with the 450 units with 25% affordable, but also an alternative as 100% affordable. Because as you've seen with the Altamira, formerly known as Altamira, now Altamadrone project on Broadway, low income residents have fewer vehicle miles traveled and fewer vehicles to begin with. Scoping, of course, the effect on wildlife corridors, which includes any fencing, lighting, and the additional road, and that impact on wildlife for those. For the hotel, they should do a full door-to-door trips by the hotel and convention center guests. Often they say, oh, a hotel is not going to bring in anybody new, but it should include that. For vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas effect. There should be also the public transportation availability, including routes and time of day available. And it should include the feasibility of being able to take public transportation to San Francisco and Marin counties, which there basically is none. And that's it. So good work. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And next public comment.
Next commenter is Maud. Maud, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Maud.
Hello. Yes, I think I'm becoming a little bit outdated. I have been interested because the numbers they have for construction are so fake. Construction in Glen Ellen has been 800 per square foot, and they propose something like 375. And so I have been looking at prefab housing and found really ready-made trackable units, 20 by 20 for $50,000. So, which would be fabulous for low-income housing, and they can be stacked. And actually, there's a lot on YouTube, very interesting what you can see there. And hopefully we could have a not-for-profit developer to work on that, because all we see from the plans so far is concerned with money and money for the developer. They're not concerned with the public or the people who are going to live there or could be living there. Thank you.
Thank you, Maud.
And the next commenter is Teresa. Teresa, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Teresa.
Hi. You know, the old saying is now is the time to fix the next 10 years, but right now we should change this for the Eldridge property now's the time to fix things for the future and forever. That the EIRs for Eldridge is coming our way, and there's still outstanding issues that have not been addressed by the county regarding the property. How can the evaluators know what to look at if there's no site plan and the numbers have not been announced? The elephant in my room is I am surprised that the consultant that did not give what the community wanted is the one doing the EIR. Is that common practice for a consultant to be doing both of those processes? It appears to me to be a conflict. The other thing I wanted to say is that the historic area previously identified by the GEHS is now slated to be residential, and that's unacceptable. I am also concerned about the carbon emissions that are impacting the environment with the tear downs. And the last comment I want to say is Diet and Body had coined the legacy of care phrase in their reports, but their actions and statements along with the county have made this phrase tired and hackneyed instead of full of promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And I would add our value, our future to that list of hackneyed phrases. Sorry for the editorial comment there. Next public comment.
Next commenter is Elisa. Elisa, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Elisa.
Hello. Yes, with my background in historic restoration, my concerns about their methodology have to do with the remediation and also the restoring or completely rebuilding of any kind of infrastructure, as well as the whole water system and heating and power. So this is environmental, in my opinion. I just want to check with Vicki, is this environmental? Because if they do, depending on how they're planning to sequence this process, they can't just come and tear into the entire square that they think is going to be changed without having a huge impact on noise and every other kind of form of just denigration in the areas surrounding. So we're talking about wildlife, we're talking about everything, wetlands, hardscape, school, everything that they are still seeming to deny looking at will also be hugely affected. So I'm planning in my letter to talk about staging and the approach of how they're planning to do it. And I need to read very carefully what they have. But Vicki, is this timeline kind of thing with methodology of remediation, is that something worthwhile to talk about in the EIR?
I saw a thumbs up. Thank you, Lisa. And next public comment.
Next commenter is Josette. Josette, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome,
Hi,
Josette.
thank you for all you've done. I just appreciate so much the work and the letters and everything you've done so far. And even though we're Springs residents, I tune into everything that's going on here. One thing Dave did forget to mention is he said that no hotel should also be listed as one of the alternatives in the consideration for the EIR. And I do want to also second what Teresa said. It seems to me a very interesting conflict of interest that the very same consultants, Diet and Bhatia, who have put all this out here are now those tasked with the EIR. And I just, I don't know, is this common practice? Thanks so much.
Thank you, Josette.
And I'll give folks just one more moment. All right, we've got another hand. Next up is Tracy. Tracy should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Tracy.
Hi. So the one thing that I haven't heard mentioned yet is the scope of the actual site. And I'm sure you all are very aware of this, but the campus is the focus of what the planning is, what the planning department is focused on, but the site is much bigger than that. And so I'm not quite sure how this fits into EIR specifically, but I think that we need to point out as a community that it's not just about the campus itself, but it's also about how the campus integrates with the open space that surrounds it and also with the communities that surround it. So I think that falls under the site plan subject, but I know that you guys will take care of that. I just want to make sure that that's on the record, that, this is a specific plan for the entire property for 900 acres and beyond. And we need to make sure that that's what is actually scoped in the EIR. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, and there's obviously going to be ripple effects going way out from this. Any other public comments?
Yep, next up we have Bean. Bean, you should now
Welcome.
be able to unmute.
Welcome, Bean.
Thanks. I don't know if Vicky's still there. I mostly have two questions for Vicky, but in terms of evacuation, fire evacuation, in the past, they have addressed that by saying that they would instead build fire breaks and other defensible space as if evacuations don't happen. So I'm kind of curious, what would be the best way to try to make measurement of how many people can be evacuated and how long? Is there a good way to phrase that and put that in in the EIR comments? The second one was sort of following up a little on Angela and Teresa's comments. Is there a way to make historic preservation and a museum make that part of the EIR comments? It's not obvious to me how they fit in well, but I sure am annoyed that they're not there. Anyway, so that's what I was thinking about. Thanks.
Vicky, are you still here? Do you want to respond?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Well, I'll start with Bean and then work my way back up. Good points, Bean. There is a museum outlined in the NOP, or it's mentioned in the NOP. So I do believe that it would be considered in at least one of the alternatives. Historic preservation does need to be considered. They need to look at the impacts of not preserving historic resources. And I believe that if they are consistent with what they did in the alternatives report, that there will be an alternative that has more historic preservation, but you can certainly make that comment that that's what you want to see in the alternatives. Fire evacuation. I heard that there is a study going on the public safety element of the general plan for the county that is looking at evacuation, not specifically at the SDC site, but at a broader area. And I'm going to have to investigate that in terms of the methodology that would be used to look at that, because I am not familiar with that. But again, it would be something that would be looked at in the emergency response section of the EIR, and it is a valid issue, and you should certainly comment on that. Okay, let's see, backing up to the comments. Teresa asked about, is it common practice for consultant to do both the EIR and the specific plan? Yes, it is. If it was a developer proposing the specific plan, then it would not be common for the developer to do an EIR on his own plan. But since the consultant was hired by the county to prepare both the specific plan and the EIR, that's not uncommon, and it's not viewed as a conflict of interest, because ultimately the county is reviewing the specific plan and making sure that what they want is in the specific plan. The consultant isn't just coming up with a plan on their own. Let's see, I did that. Oh, the sequence of remediation and staging and phasing, that's a really good comment. Nothing has been discussed, and I don't think it's in the alternatives report, and it hasn't been discussed at the PAT. I'm a member of the planning advisory team, and that's a really good comment, because the construction impacts alone are going to be major, as we all know. And CEQA does require analysis of everything, of construction, operation, maintenance, and abandonment. So that is a very valid comment to make, to question that, or to ask for that to be included in the project description and to be analyzed. Anything, did I miss something?
Not that I'm aware of.
Through the chair, we do have one hand still raised.
Okay, yeah, thanks for your patience. We'll take the next public comment. And thank you, Vicky.
All right, next up is Lori. Lori, you should be able to unmute.
Welcome, Lori.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure how what I'm thinking of fits into all of this, but I have some concerns about the actual construction going on the campus and how it's going to be affecting the community, as far as if anything were to come up where we needed to evacuate quickly, and there are tons of, well, stuff, construction vehicles, roads torn up, machinery coming in and going out, and how that's going to affect any evacuation that we might have to do during the construction period. Also, during the construction period, the noise level, the emissions, the light, how is that going to affect the wildlife corridor, the wildlife there, and the surrounding community, and listening to that ongoing over time as they're constructing this. And the other thing is that when all is said and done and families move in there, and perhaps a hotel or whatever, what kind of assurances are we going to have as far as what will be allowed as far as noise level at night when the animals are moving, and also what effect domestic animals might have on the wildlife corridor as well. These are just some of the concerns that I have been running around in my head. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. And I think if you look at the NOP on page 5, which has a list of the things that are going to be addressed, I think you'll see a lot of those things in there. There's noise and vibration, there's biological resources. I think a lot of what you mentioned are really good comments, and they can be slotted into some of those things.
And Chair Dawson, we have another hand.
All right.
Next up is Alice. Alice, you should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, Alice.
Me again. So with all of this talk about evacuations, I'm wondering, I'm sure most everybody has been reading of late. There have been a couple of big developments that have been shot down by judges in, because maybe the county did not take into account the, evacuation and wildfire stuff. So there have been a number of lawsuits recently where I guess citizens bringing lawsuits against their counties because of evacuations and stuff. They have been successful. So I'm wondering if anybody knows, were those lawsuits like CEQA oriented, casting a broad net in response to an EIR that whatever community group or groups did not like? Or were they lawsuits that were just specifically about the evacuation element of that had not been addressed? I mean, that's kind of a very particular question. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but curious if anyone does. And that's it. Thank you.
Good question, Alice. Anybody know anything more about that on the council or in the public? Well, Alice, if you find out or anybody finds out, bring us the answer next time. Okay, any other public comments, Hannah?
We do have a few hands raised, but there are people who've already commented on this item. Just a reminder, it's one comment per person per item.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I think I'll turn it back over to Councilmember Eagles, and however you want to, where you want to go from here.
And I know Vicky has, thank you, Chair Dawson. I know Vicky has to sign out soon. And Vicky, thank you for hanging in here so long and answering all these questions. So anything final for Vicky? Vicky, I do have one quick one. If something like a school or something is not really in the scope yet, we don't need to comment directly on something like that, right? Even if we had, I'm just trying to understand where our lines are a little bit.
What do you mean in terms of the school? I mean,
well, if the school has other, the school is a different kind of decision, and the school may or may not move, and so and there's no direct environmental impacts I would think would be measured in conjunction with potential school. I don't think so. Things of that nature we wouldn't have to comment on, I don't think.
Well, if you as a group support locating a school on the campus, then you would want an alternative that provides space for that. I mean, it doesn't take up a big, huge amount of space, but if that is something that you feel should be included in one of the alternatives or in an alternative, then you can make that comment. The difficulty is that the school district hasn't proposed any movement of a school there or construction of a school. And the analysis hasn't been conducted yet to determine whether there is a need for a new school as a result of the population that would go onto the site.
You're absolutely right. A school is probably a poor example, but you've just answered it in a more general sense.
Okay.
That if we think there should be space for something, then we might work that in that way. So thank you for that. Yes, the school district is doing demographic studies. We're declining in this valley. So
yeah,
big questions for answering down the road. So thank you. Sorry, anyone else for Vicky?
Well, Vicky, thank you so much for coming tonight and sharing all your expertise. And
my pleasure.
Very grateful to have you in the community.
Yeah, happy to help out. And I want to say to, anybody listening still on the call, if you have questions, feel free to reach out, and I'm here as a resource.
Thanks.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Vicky.
So I do want to make one more comment, if I may, Chair Dawson, about process, and then we can talk more. But I did want to get back to what Councilmember Newhouser and Hannah were talking about, because I do think, to be super clear, Mark, that we can't collaborate. That's just so. What we did last time with the letters, we did put it up 5 days in advance of the meeting, but we weren't able to collaborate. So you were able to see it, but we still can't take collaborative comments until we all get together again, is my understanding. Now, if Hannah goes back and checks and we're able to take input, but not come back to you, just say, thank you for the input, then Hannah will address that question, but we can't collaborate. I mean, that's just, and I know it's flawed, and we do the best we can, and then, we submit what we can do, right? That's the limitation. So I just want to be clear on that, because I don't think we can collaborate and not, hit a quorum.
Yeah, Mark?
Well, if I may respond, yeah, my understanding is that, say, for example, yeah, we can't like just share information back and forth, but what can happen is a draft, like say a structure of a document or the plans for a document can be shared with the community. That means publicly as well as with the other council members. And then that information, and then other council members can use that information, and the public too, can then provide comments back to Hannah, that can then be posted and can be utilized by the ad hoc committee. I mean, it's kind of a convoluted way of sharing information, but it sounds like it's a workaround for being able to get content, so that it's not like presenting a document, a couple of days in advance of, review, and then trying to get everyone to buy into it. I thought that was an acceptable means to allow greater participation.
I mean, I'm not sure about this, but I have a sense that like if it's just input, like I think Kate mentioned, if it's just people giving the committee stuff with no back and forth, say like, here's an idea, that might be acceptable. But I'm not sure about that. But yeah, I think if it seems like it's back and forth, if there's discussion happening on whatever level, even just on a document, I don't think that's okay. But I'm sure she'll give us the full rundown. Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
Just an observation about this particular this particular issue that we're talking about. Fortunately, though the MAC is going to develop its own document, as individuals, we're also allowed to comment. So, I mean, I think the encouragement is to recognize that not everything can or will be possibly covered in the MAC doc, but we can cover it as individuals. And I would like to think that that's something of a relief, and a relief on the people in the ad hoc who are going to try to compile as much information into a single document as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Good point. This doesn't have to be, the MAC letter doesn't have to be exhaustive. And there will be the chance to comment on the draft EIR as well. So, we want it to be solid, but it doesn't have to be exhaustive and exhausting, as it probably would be. So back to you, Kate.
No, I wish it were otherwise. I'm not advocating for this the way, but I just want to be clear that I think this is the way it is, and Hannah will comment. And I wish it was different, but that's why I really appreciate your comments, Matt, because yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? I don't have a lot of we've gotten some good feedback. I think Vicky's comments were really helpful, and my fellow MAC member questions were great too, because a lot of them I had as well. So thank you all. I don't know, I'm open to other comments and feedback now on any more specifics or what we could add, but I don't have anything, else to say at this point.
Do you feel like, do you and the other ad hoc members feel like you have enough to draft the letter? It'll be more work, but is there enough? Do you need to have more tonight to get started? I guess is my question.
I don't think so, but I know Damon has his hand up. I feel, I don't know, I can't speak for Matt and Angela, but I feel like I feel pretty good now that we've kind of hashed this through.
Well, let's hear from Damon, and then if Matt and Angela can chime in after that.
Ad hoc committees can use the community consultants like Vicky So you are not losing access to her or someone else that you may identify. You just can't use us.
Right.
And so I think I've often worked on ad hocs who use community consultants, that's their term. And those are community experts or individuals within the community who have things to share. And you can use them as far as clarifying and still be within the Brown Act.
Thank you, Damon.
The Brown Act is also concerned about powerful individuals within the group having greater influence than just one vote. And that's part of the reason why these things work this way.
Yeah, right.
Angela?
Yeah, right. I agree with Damon. And I think when we wrote the MAC letter, the first MAC letter, we did have input from Vicki and John McCall, and it was very helpful. And I think, again, it will be very helpful to have some experts. And I think that we have our work cut out for us, but I do think that we have enough information. And I think it was particularly helpful to get comments from the public to see kind of what they were thinking and where they were going with that. So I think we got a lot to do. We should get started, ready to go.
Thanks, Angela. I so appreciate your committee taking this on again. And Matt, any comments or?
Yeah, and my thought originally was that there were two templates that we can use for information. One was the back end of the NOP itself, had a long list of areas that we can address. And the other is that we fortunately did an awful lot of very specific work in the appendix for the MAC doc that can be applied to the comments. And so, will we cover everything? Almost surely not. But tonight's conversation, the stuff that we have from Vicki and all the other work that we've done should give us a pretty good head start on a pretty comprehensive comment, series of comments, I would think.
All right, thanks, Matt. And Vice Chair Handren, you had your hand up a moment ago?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you once again to the committee for putting the time in and doing the hard work on this. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Vicki. And before we get to Councilmember Newhouser, I just want to check in with Council Members Cooper and Oldroyd. If you haven't heard too much from you guys lately, so I just want to make sure you have a chance to speak if you would like it.
Well, I'll just comment. I'll echo what was just said. I'm still fairly new at this, and the lion's share has been done by the Ad Hoc Committee. And I'm learning and appreciate it very much. Would do anything I could, but I'm the least probably among them. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Jed.
And I just want to say that I also appreciate the public comments because I thought they were very carefully noted.
Yeah, thank you to the public who's still out there. And Councilmember Newhouser.
Thank you. I previously submitted a document, and I think that was submitted to the Ad Hoc Committee that had recommendations in it from the January 6th meeting or January 5th. And so I respectfully submit that as my recommendations for inclusion in the scoping letter. They were recommendations specifically to address basically limits or critical on issues that would help to mitigate or prevent environmental harm. So I think that I would like those considered for inclusion in the scoping letter. One other issue I wanted to raise, and this is something that struck me as one that I think we may need to specifically call out, and that is the distinction between open space and habitat corridors. And even in the states, 30 by 30 definition of open space. It's really about accessible open space. And I think that one of the major issues surrounding habitat corridors is the incursion of human occupation into those areas and the impacts of that on the viability of the corridors. And so that, there's specific things that we can recommend. And I think I touched on some of those in my comments on the previous letter. But these are going to be like, carefully constructed, designed and constructed trails to help keep wildlife habitat corridor utilization, separate from human occupation. That's just one example. I mean, there's many others. I think I also included increased setbacks to accommodate fire safety setbacks. So there's, but I guess the question around, the process is, how do we get our comments? And I thought that's what this meeting was to get our comments to the Ad Hoc Committee. And if we want to submit additional comments to the committee, how do we do that? Are we going to have another opportunity to do that before the live editing, or are we going to have another meeting? Could we have an emergency meeting perhaps? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so Hannah, it would be great if there was a way to at least provide input to the committee, even if we can't have obviously we can't have a back and forth. But as I understand it, haven't quite, or what are your thoughts on that? I'm not quite clear if that seems like it's a possibility or probably not.
So I am going to clarify, but I think if it's a one-way flow of comments from non-ad hoc members to the ad hoc with the things that they would like to include, and then we post those publicly along with all the content that the ad hoc produces, I'm pretty sure that'll work, but I do want to double check just to clarify.
Okay. All right, thanks. We'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Yeah, Kate?
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate kind of, Damon has reminded us we have resources, and I think Matt has reminded us that, that other folks are going to comment. What I'm trying to say is we're going to do our best on this letter, but it may not be perfect. It may not include everything, but I think that's okay. I think we will cover it. And so I think we just have to set reasonable expectations for what we can do with a single letter and be content with that and feel okay about that. And so putting that out there.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Well said. Yeah, Jed?
Who do we send our one-way letter to? Kate? If we have ideas, we want to share them. As Hannah said, one way, not back and forth.
So in the way I'm imagining it, but again, I want to confirm, they would be sent to me. I would distribute them to the full MAC and post them to the MAC website. So they'd be available to the public as well. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, did you have another comment?
No, sorry, I'll lower my hand.
Okay. So hopefully that all works out. We should probably have one more opportunity for public comment at this point. Is that, I've lost track a little bit.
You have already opened and closed public comment for this item.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then, unless anybody objects, I think we'll move on, but it sounds like we've got a pretty good plan started and likely a way for us to provide more input. So let me see, it's 8:20. Hannah, how long is your presentation?
I can get through it pretty quickly, but it is not time sensitive. If you'd like to take it to the next meeting, I know we are going long, so it's at your discretion, Chair Dawson.
Anybody object if we move Hannah's presentation to the next meeting? Nope.
I won't take any offense.
Yeah, don't take it personally. This way we can anticipate it for even longer, Then I guess we're at number 10, consideration of items for a future agenda. Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
I am curious. What do we have to do if we want to rent space and have a party at SDC. Hannah, I would love to know who we contact and ask that question.
That I do not know, but I can look into it.
I would like to do it on the 20th of August. I have a date even. And I have a vision. And I think rather than have it at my house, if we could have it at SDC and open it up to the community, that would be absolutely fabulous. So, so there's an item there's a future item for our agenda. How's that?
All right, party planning. Yeah.
Yeah, pancake breakfast, you could call it.
If I may, I tried to get a meeting.
Yeah, Mark.
Scheduled. I tried to schedule a meeting at SDC, and I actually went through all the channels, and they won't allow it. They won't allow any indoor meetings. They say it's because of COVID, but you know, or the potential safety issues with their staff. But yeah, I was unable to get that. But I do support the idea of having to get together somewhere. I just don't know if you're going to have any luck getting it on the campus.
Well, we got 7 months. Maybe we can pull it off.
Yeah, maybe they'll lower those restrictions. Yeah.
Yeah, Angela?
I just want to say, Matt, we've had a couple historical meetings there, and it's been really fun. They were outside. So, you know, it could happen.
Any other items for next month for the agenda? I think, I mean, obviously the letter is going to be a big thing, and I think possibly the Office of Equity might be presenting, or at least they're possibly on the agenda. So that would be another fairly good sized thing. And then we do have the Ad Hoc Committee presentation by Hannah. But you know, these aren't set in stone, so we can certainly take some more ideas and do another month if we can't do them in March. But I think it's almost 8:30, and it's been a long meeting, but not our longest. So, and we got through a lot, and we celebrated Nikita Dukaraz. That was a high point for me.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that was cool. You know, just to put this in people's brains, if there's somebody else in the community that you'd like to recognize, let's just keep that in mind, because it's I think this is a good place to do it. You know, it's a little bit of official recognition and builds our sense of community, and so just keep that in your thoughts for another month. We can do another recognition. It wouldn't necessarily have to involve a whole certificate, but maybe it should, you know. Yeah, Angela?
Well, I just wanted to mention, I don't know how many people know, but about the Jack to Jack race, which is going to be, it's the Jack London Yacht Club. It's going to be March 26th, and it's going from Jack London Lodge, the saloon. And they're also going to have events at Jack London Village. And the Yacht Club is an organization that raises money and then gives it back to many nonprofits in Sonoma Valley. So they do really good work, and it should just be kind of fun. And it's probably one of the second events other than the village fair that's happening after, you know, since COVID. So if you have an opportunity, stop by, and there's going to be a beer garden at the village and lots of open houses and food and a kombucha bar and music. So it should be fun and a good cause.
I missed the date.
Oh, March 26th, Saturday.
Okay.
I think that's Saturday from 10 to 2.
Okay.
And it's free.
Any other upcoming items? I know the Glen Ellen Forum is having their creek cleanup or town cleanup on the 6th of March from, what is it, 9 to 11, meet at the post office. If I got that right. I just saw a flyer about it. So I think that's right. Keep your eyes open. I think that just verify what I just said, but I think that's got the right information. I did it a couple of years ago. It was fun to be out there with folks. Okay, any other items for future agendas? Going once, going twice. Sold. Another MAC meeting. I was about to say down the drain, but that's not quite right. Another MAC meeting accomplished.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
All right.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
All right. Nobody's opposed. All right. The meeting is
everyone.
officially ended at 8:27. And thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hanging in there.
Thanks, Hannah.
Be
Thanks,
safe
Alondra.
out there.
All right.
Anna.
See you next time.
Good night, everybody.